So like now looking back on my start with horses and how I just had like no self-confidence when I first started, it's obvious to me like why they would run away from me.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to be caught. They didn't want to hang out. So I had to figure out how to get close to them, which meant me becoming stronger in my sense of self, more confident. And then I started to see like how I was just letting myself be run over in these, interpersonal relationships that I was having. So it's allowed me to start to separate from that version of myself that was not very strong, not confident, quite dismembered. And the horses allowed me to practice becoming the woman that I am now.
I'm Casey Main, author, writer, and party girl turned spiritual junkie, and I'm dedicated to helping you better understand the most important and most complicated relationship you'll ever be in, the one you have with yourself. It's the only relationship that you're in for the entirety of your time here, and it affects every single aspect of your life. Yet it is the one most often overlooked. This podcast is here to help you explore that relationship, get to know yourself so you can accept yourself, heal yourself, and become a better version of yourself. So let's get to it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Better You podcast. I am your host, Casey Main, and as always, thank you so much for being here. This is, if you're listening on the day that this episode drops, it is the week of Thanksgiving, which is kind of crazy. If you're here in the US, then it's the Thanksgiving week for you. And so this is, a week all about gratitude and everything. So of course, I want to express my gratitude that you all are listening. Whether you're new or if you've been listening along for a while, really, thank you so much. This has been just a really fun experience, sometimes stressful, but a really great experience of growth for me. And I'm so proud of the podcast and how far it's come. And I'm really looking forward to next year. So as I've mentioned in previous episodes, this will be the last new episode for this calendar year. In December, I'm going to air the best of for the first 4 weeks of December. December actually has 5 Tuesdays in it. So the first 4 will do reruns. And I'm really kind of excited about it because the other day I went through and calculated all the analytics and everything and found what I'll say are the most popular episodes. And I'm basing that off of unique downloads. And the podcasting world can get kind of weird with analytics and stuff, but I just figured total unique downloads would be the best barometer to go off of. And so that puts recent episodes at a little bit of a disadvantage. But it was really cool to see over the past, I guess, year and a half now, or 80 something episodes, which ones got the most downloads, and some of them go way back. So I'm going to air those with the 4th most popular one, 3rd, 2nd, and then end the year on the most popular episode so far. And then the final Tuesday of December, on December 29th, will be a solo episode where I will share kind of my biggest takeaways and life lessons from the year. I did that at the end of 2019 going into this year. And it was really a very therapeutic exercise for me, and it was a really popular episode. So I figured I will do that again to kind of close out the year. And then looking into 2021, I'm really excited about it. I've got a really cool guest lineup. We're going to make sure that we're covering really a variety of topics and really approaching our relationship with ourselves from all angles. So mind, body, whether you want to call it spirit or soul, and those are kind of the more spiritual, or some might consider them woo-woo episodes, but those are some of my favorites. So, we'll have the mindset and the psychological component, we'll have the spiritual component, and then we're also going to get into some that are a little bit more health and wellness, but I don't want to do your basic health and wellness stuff. I always want to tie it more into a holistic approach. So really excited about 2021. And if you guys are not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the journey. Okay, so before we get into today's episode, I do want to recommend some previous ones. And what I love about this conversation to kind of end our guest interviews for the year is it's a really unique type of therapy, I think. And if you go back through the different podcast episodes we've done since the beginning of the podcast, we've covered all kinds of different approaches to whether you want to call it therapy or self-work, working on yourself, whatever it is. And really, I love that because one of my main messages in doing this is like, there's no right way. It's really, there's only your way. So find whatever resonates with you, whatever type of work feels right to you, whatever messaging feels true to you, and then go with that. I think one of the most detrimental mindsets we can have in all areas of life is when we think there's only one right way. And then we try and force ourselves into that, or we feel guilty or bad or beat ourselves up because that way isn't working for us, when in reality, I think we're all supposed to find our own path. So today's conversation is about equine therapy, which I've always loved horses, but I didn't really know that was even a thing. And it's just super interesting. But as I looked back through past episodes, I realized we've covered some really cool stuff. So we really talk about healing and kind of therapy in nature in episode 79, Finding Forgiveness and Healing with Sarah Schulting-Krantz. And then we talk about more traditional therapy in episode 72, To Change Your Life and Change the World, You Have to Do the Work with Brandy Harvey. We talk about breath work in episode 69, Breathing Through Stress and Anxiety with Dr. Emma Seppala. And then we discuss like neurology and how your brain works and kind of external factors that affect that. So use of technology, what you're eating, that kind of stuff in episode 43, Brainwash Yourself to Make Better Decisions with Dr. Austin Perlmutter. And then we talk about meditation back in, I forgot to put the episode number. Oops. It'll take me a minute to look that up. So it's earlier in the year. And the episode is called Meditation to Reduce Stress, Increase Focus, and Rest Your Brain with Monty Shalmali. So those are some previous episodes that you guys can go back into to really explore just different ways that we can all kind of work through whatever we've got going on. And then two more, because we discuss like these specific things in today's conversation. Episode 51, Your Unconscious, Your Ego, and You with Jungian psychologist Gary Bobroff. Today's guest is also into Jungian psychology, so that's a really relevant episode. And then we do talk about kind of if you've been through some major traumas in your life, then working through that can be really difficult to just go back and address it directly. And so you'll see today we talk about how equine therapy can really help in that area. And then back in episode 7, we talk about EMDR. And that episode is titled How the Body Remembers What the Mind Tries to Forget with Amy Pope Latham. And that's a good one because EMDR, as you'll hear if you listen to it, is like this way to like activate your limbic system and kind of tap into the feelings and the energy that your body is holding on to from past traumas and release them in a way that doesn't involve you having to really think back through what you've been through, which is usually the case in more like traditional talk therapy. So those are a bunch of previous episodes that you guys can go back into. And then as we get into December, I'll be airing the best of reruns. So make sure you tune in for those as well. All right, so let's talk about today's guest. Dr. Ashley Dial, formerly Dr. Thompson, received her PhD in depth psychology at Pacifica Graduate Institute of Carpinteria, and I probably did not pronounce that right. Unlike traditional Western psychology, depth psychology does not seek to label problems or prescribe quick fix solutions. Instead, it approaches mental health issues with compassion, love, empathy, and creates consciousness around what troubles us. Dr. Dial's research and studies on the horse-human relationship have afforded her special insight into the psychological elements involved in equine therapies. In addition to her in-depth studies and education, Dr. Dial's experience working on horse ranches gave her the advantage of complete immersion into the understanding of horses. Combining her knowledge of depth psychology and trans-species psychology, Dr. Dial has developed a unique therapeutic model that offers a refreshing and real approach to modern-day issues. Dr. Dial's therapeutic technique is personable, honest, and organic. Working from a Jungian perspective of mental health, the entirety of the individual is taken into consideration and worked with in depth. As the goal of any mental health treatment model should be, Dr. Dial engages clients with the expectation that whatever issues they may have, their treatment will be specific and results-oriented. And in this episode, we discuss her very interesting story of why and how she first started working with horses, what depth psychology is and how it differs from traditional psychology, the significance and the insight we can gain from our dreams, the energetic conversations that are happening alongside our actual conversations, the intuitive nature of horses and how they can sense what's going on in us, how and why trans-species therapy can be an easier way to work through traumas and issues than traditional therapy, and how working with horses can help with everything from trauma, depression, and grief to everyday stressors and anxiety. This is a unique one because it's actually an in-person interview. So Dr. Dial's horse ranch where she does her equine therapy is like less than an hour south of where I live. So I was able to drive down there, meet her in person, see the property, see all the horses. Like I got to meet all the horses. It was just such a cool experience. But because it was in person, the audio is not as clear as our normal episodes. And that's just some technological stuff. I just basically don't have the equipment to do in-person interviews in a way that will allow my audio engineer guy to cut out the background noise. But I actually like that because the background noise in this one is like a lot of birds and nature and stuff. So I think it goes along nicely with the conversation. So that is it. We're going to go ahead and jump into this conversation with Dr. Dial.
So I usually like to start with just kind of a little bit of your story, like your background and like how you got into this work. Because I mean, this is unique stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because every time someone asks me that question of how I got into this work, I try to see some other way that I got into this work, but there's really like just this one story.
Okay.
A lot of people assume that, I probably grew up with horses, but I did not. I didn't get into working with horses until I was in my 20s and in my graduate program. So I started my graduate program in depth psychology at a place called Pacifica Graduate Institute out in California. Mm-hmm. I was living here in St. Augustine. It was a commuter program, so all of us in the cohort would come from all around the country, fly to Santa Barbara once a month, and stay on campus for these 3-day intensives. And I was like halfway through my first year of studies at Pacifica, and I just thought I was going there to get my PhD in psychology, and I started having these dreams about horses, and it was like every single night I was having these wildly intense, super vivid dreams about horses, and it was like all I could think about during the day. And it just seemed to come out of nowhere. I mean, I wasn't doing anything with horses.
Did you love horses as a child? Or, I mean, most children do, but
right.
Was there any history of horses?
So as a kid, I was that little girl that a lot of little girls are, and was, horse crazy and had my horse books and wanted any opportunity to like interact with them. So my mom would book like, the occasional birthday trail ride.
Yeah.
Which was like the highlight of my life. And I mean, I did have some, a little bit more obsessive behaviors, I think, when it came to horses as a kid. Like, I didn't just want a horse, I wanted to be a horse.
Oh, nice.
So I remember like being at my grandma's house, Nani, I called her, and I would make her lock me in the pantry, and like that was my horse stall. Which was a little concerning, to my grandmother.
No, I love that. She's like,
I was
okay.
like perfectly content standing, in the dark pantry, just being a horse. Or like I'd get my little sister to like, ride on my back until I had rug burns on my knees.
Yep.
But yeah, so I mean that was kind of the extent of my horse craziness as a kid. And we never had the opportunity, to do, I never went and took lessons or anything like that. So, skip forward, until halfway through my first year of studies in graduate school, and I start having all these dreams, and it was just relentless. Like, it was every single night. It went on for a couple months until I finally was like, okay, whatever this is, it's not going to shut up or leave me alone. It's not going to stop. So obviously I need to listen to whatever this, phenomenon, whatever this is that's happening in my psyche, and engage with it on another level.
Mm-hmm. What were the dreams, like there were just horses in them, or was it like a recurring type of interaction with a horse, or?
They were all really different.
Okay.
Sometimes I was riding them. I do remember one of the dreams that seemed to have this like reoccurring theme to it, which was that I would be at someone's house, and then I realized that they had a horse locked up in the backyard.
Interesting.
And it was like not a good situation for the horse, and without their permission, I would go and let this horse loose.
Okay, I can see some clear symbolism there. I know we're not supposed to take dreams so literally, but yeah, that's pretty obvious.
So I think that was the only sort of reoccurring theme. I would go and set this horse free, and it would like run off into the woods, and I had done this good deed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought, okay, I need to engage with this on another level. And, the obvious thing was, okay, I need to go and find horses in the flesh.
Yeah.
And see what happens. So I found this little barn right up the road from here in Hastings, where they let me come and, muck the stalls and groom the horses and start to ride. And it wasn't like a formal, lesson program. It was just this tiny barn with like 4 or 5 horses in it. And I would ride with this woman that owned the barn, and the extent of the lesson would essentially be her putting me on, the hottest, craziest horse she had, and we would set off into the woods, and I had to hang on. So that was how I started to learn how to ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where I met my horse Saltos, who ended up being my first horse. He was at that barn. And when I started engaging with these horses, in my waking world, my dreams started to take on this whole other life, and all of these other, really curious, things started to happen between my interactions with the horses and then what was going on in my dreams with the horses. So then I started to dream about the horses that I, was starting to get to know.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of like overlay and bleed through. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And at what point in your school program were you at this point?
I was probably coming to a close on the first year.
Okay, so you were in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning. Yeah. So like my first, we would do like summer fieldwork studies. So my first summer fieldwork study, I did on the benefits of yoga because I've always had a strong yoga practice. So at that point, I wasn't at the barn in Hastings. And then once I started to work with the horses and I was having all of these, healing experiences for myself and still having these dreams going on, then my second summer fieldwork studies was all about the relationships I was having with the horses and the experiences that I was having with the horses. And from then on, everything that I did in the program was braided into what was happening with the horses.
Okay, is that a common thing in depth psychology? Like, talk a little bit about like what is depth psychology compared to other forms of psychology? Because I've never heard of that one before.
Yeah, that's why I went all the way out to California once a month to do this program because I didn't find another one like it. Mm-hmm. It was a really unique program. Depth psychology is an intentional departure from clinical psychology, from the medicalized version of psychology.
Okay.
So we're not out to diagnose. We're not using the DSM to, tell you what's wrong with you so that we can bill insurance companies and play that whole game. So it is a more holistic approach. It's based in Jungian theory mostly. So if you're familiar with psychology, you've probably heard of Carl Jung.
Yeah, we actually I had a Jungian psychologist on the podcast months ago.
I need to listen to that one. I bet that was great.
So what's interesting is Jung talked a lot about dreams.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of dream work, a lot of archetypal psychology. But yeah, Jung had what's known as the Red Book, which is basically like his personal journal. But it was a lot of the material in the Red Book was all about his dream life. Mm-hmm. So really taking in earnest the material that comes out of your unconscious psyche and using that material to, get to know yourself better, to develop your self-awareness, and to be more connected. So yeah, when I started having these dreams, it was like this precursor almost to what we were going to start to study. Mm-hmm. But that goes back to the relationship I've had with my dad growing up. My dad always emphasized the importance of your dream life. So had I not had the influence of my father in developing that sensibility in me, maybe I wouldn't have taken those dreams as seriously as I did. Mm-hmm.
So what would you say like the importance of our dream life is? Because I know I've listened to some people, I listened to this one guy talk about how it's not so much like what's happening in the dreams, it's more the feelings that you feel. Then there's all kinds of stuff on the internet and books that look at what's happening in different symbols within the dream that mean something in your life. And so I've just seen so many different ways to look at it. So like what to you and in the world of like depth psychology, what are our dreams telling us, or how are we supposed to look at them?
Well, what you don't want to do is have a dream about a snake and then Google what does snake mean in your dreams.
I've 100% done that. I love that you use that example. I've totally done that. Okay.
Yeah. So, dreams are this avenue. They're like this gateway into our deeper sense of self. There's a process called dream tending that we learned how to do at Pacifica. that's similar to dream analysis. So you make associations to the images that you have in your dreams, and you start to connect these associations with like you talked about, like the feelings that you're having in the dreams, and then you start to get this whole different insight or perspective on like a problem that you're having in your life, or a difficult relationship or a decision that you're trying to make, because all of that dream material that's living in your unconscious psyche, it is communicating to you through your dreams using images and using those feelings. So if we can learn how to access that and interpret that, then we have this like whole wealth of knowledge about how to approach our lives.
Okay. All right. I love that. I'm curious. So you say like it helps us get to our deepest, like our root of self. How do you define self? Like, does this get into spirituality for you, or like what to you, like what is the self?
That's a big question.
I know.
Right? So I immediately think of like I see in my mind like lowercase s self, and the big self. So self is, I don't think it's something that we ever are able to completely get a hold of and define. It's that process of individuation. So Jung talks about this process of individuation that can be represented by this like sort of it's not linear, right? So it's like always happening, it's always getting closer to the center of something. So if we're on that journey of like always trying to get to the truth of who we are, that to me is the image of what self is. So it's getting behind or below your persona, your ego, who other people have told you that you are, the beliefs that you have integrated about yourself from your childhood, from negative experiences, maybe, from your complexes that you hang on to and identify with. And there is a lot of spirituality in that. I mean, I think there has to be in that, trying to come to that center of yourself.
Right. Well, that I think is where like uppercase self.
Right.
Like lowercase self, you can probably look at from a psychological standpoint all day long.
Right.
But eventually you're going to get to uppercase self.
Yeah.
Okay, depth psychology. I love that. All right, so let's switch into talking about horses then. All right, so you start to kind of move your studies into this relationship. And you mentioned like you yourself had a lot of healing experiences. Do you mind sharing any of those?
Yeah. Well, when I first started having these dreams, and then especially when I went and started working with, real in the flesh horses, I was in and out of some super toxic relationships.
Yeah. Yep. I hear that. So was I. I just wasn't hanging out with horses at the time.
And, I was young. I was still in my 20s and trying to figure out who I was. And when I say toxic relationships, I mean like really abusive. And when I started working with the horses, first it gave me something else to focus my attention on, and it gave me somewhere to go, and it it forced me to like step up because I wanted so badly to be close to the horses and like really experience that connection that you imagine when you're, you know, riding a horse or being with a horse. But in order to do that with a horse, it's not like you just go and, you know, pet them and give them a hug. So I would go out to the barn and the horses like didn't want anything to do with me.
Because they can sense, like, are they just super intuitive that they can sense like whatever we've got going on inside of us?
Yeah. So like now looking back on, you know, my start with horses and how I just had like no self-confidence when I first started, it's obvious to me like why they would run away from me. They didn't want to be caught. They didn't want to hang out. So I had to, you know, figure out how to get close to them, which meant me becoming stronger in my sense of self, more confident. And then I started to see like how I was just letting myself be run over in these, you know, interpersonal relationships that I was having. So it's allowed me to start to separate from that version of myself that was not very strong, not confident, quite dismembered. And the horses allowed me to practice becoming the woman that I am now.
So like, how did you do that? Because like I'll say, even when I got here and I was standing there and there's all the horses, like I kind of had that same thought. I'm like, oh, maybe they'll come right up to me, and that means I'm like one with self or whatever. So like but then if they don't, then what does that tell you, and like what does that work look like? Do you start to then, should you be asking yourself like a lot of questions, or try and get calm and just like feel what you've got going on? Like how do you become one with yourself? Another big question.
So, you know, when you're working with horses, what they're really looking for is for you to be the leader. So especially out here, I mean, this is just how equine psychology works anywhere, but especially out here when they get to live in a more natural and open environment and be in a herd, there's always a head mare in the herd. So the mare is the female horse that's like at the top of the rung. She's the, you know, queen bee in charge. Everybody gets out of her way when she comes through, and if she wants that patch of grass over there, she's gonna have it. So whenever you step into the herd or just a one-on-one engagement with the horse, you have to be that head mare.
Interesting. Okay.
So you have to figure out how to start really embodying that head marishness.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And then they feel safe with you. They feel comfortable because then they understand, okay, Casey knows what she's doing. She's got a plan. She's confident. She's clear. So I can relax and just follow her. And that's when the connection happens.
Interesting. Okay. Is there like science or research that shows how or why they're able to pick up on that? Like how do they know?
I mean, that's just, you know, generations and generations of cowboys and horse people and horse women.
Yeah.
And now natural horsemanship who, you know, people have figured out how to insert themselves in that equine psychology. And just from observing wild horses and understanding how they work socially in a herd, and I don't want to say using that against them or using that to our advantage, but it's our avenue in to getting them to accept us. So a lot of, there is a lot of research and science behind that.
Is this unique to horses? Because I know, like, I'm thinking, okay, like when you have a dog,
right?
Like you got to be the alpha.
Exactly.
And if you are, then they really are like man's best friend. But if you're not, then you're going to have a troublesome dog. So is it all herd animals, or is there something particularly unique, or pack animals unique about horses?
Well, I actually do use the example a lot with people of, if they're coming in to work with the horses and they've never been around horses, I'll ask them, like, do you have a dog? A lot of times people, say yes, they have a dog. And I explain the parallel, dogs want you to be alpha. Like, when they realize you're alpha, they feel safe, they can relax and just trust you to take care of everything. Mm-hmm. Horses are very similar in that way. Of course, dogs are predator animals and horses are prey animals. So I think that is very similar to herd animals that are, social like horses are. But there's also this, when you are able to make that connection with a horse, there is something that's different about it, I think, than making a connection with, a herd of goats, maybe.
Well, they're super intelligent, right?
Yes, horses are very intelligent. So, yeah, making that connection and developing that relationship where they understand that you're head mare. And it's different too when it's not just you and one horse, it's like you and 25 horses. Mm-hmm. And you can walk out into the pasture and they know, like, okay, better be on good behavior.
Yeah, mom's here.
Yeah.
So are you queen bee among all the horses here?
Well, you have to be.
Yeah. Or what would happen if you weren't?
Well, they'll test you. Mm-hmm. And it's not just me, right? Like we have other horse owners out here that understand this same concept, right? Mm-hmm. And they know that when they go to deal with their horse and they're amongst 25, 26 other horses, in order to be safe, they have to exude that energy that all the other horses know, stay out of my personal space. I'm in charge when I'm coming out here. Don't turn your butt towards me. Don't even think about, trying to bite me or any of that kind of business. And of course, usually you walk out there and it's, everything's peaceful and it's fine.
Yeah.
But you have to always have that attitude about you.
So what I love about this, because I feel like it's something we like understand on a certain level, but I don't know that we talk about like what a monumental concept this is, that we are putting off an energy, a vibe, whatever you want to call it, that other entities, other humans, other animals are picking up on. So there's a tangible thing there.
Right.
And if you really think about that, like, that's incredible. Like, think about the power that has. And it's like we kind of talk about it like, oh, this person gives off a bad vibe or whatever. And I don't know, I think that's mind-blowing, and I don't know that we spend as much time as we should really thinking about the power of that. But then I also think it's difficult, or at least I've found it's difficult to figure out, okay, so you and I are sitting here. What is your energy that I'm picking up on, and what is my own? Because sometimes I've found when I'm around certain people, I feel uncomfortable. And for the longest time, I thought it was me, like it was my own insecurities. And then as I've done a little bit of my own work, I'm like, oh no, I'm picking up on their discomfort. Mm-hmm. And so are we also picking up on stuff from the horses? And do horses have their own stuff going on? Like, is it like a relationship?
Oh, yeah. So, yes, like, we're having this conversation, but there's a whole other conversation going on underneath what we're saying. Mm-hmm. That's unconscious, it's nonverbal, it is energetic.
Yeah.
So, and that's why the equine therapy works so well, and it is so transformative, because once you can get people to like tap into that and understand, like, you are putting out this whole other communication,
and the horse is reacting to it. So there's the mirror.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think it's easier for us to do that with animals because it's not, like, are we able to open up and bring our guard down a little more with a horse versus another human, because that just comes with its whole other set of consequences in our like day-to-day life?
Yes. Yeah. Again, another awesome, effect of doing the equine therapy work versus going into a therapist's office.
Mm-hmm.
People definitely are much more easily able to let their guard, fall to the wayside when they're interacting with this horse who isn't gonna, from the client's perspective, isn't gonna have any judgment towards them. So even if, we're having this conversation, I'm not concerned about any judgment from you. But someone who's coming from a place of, trauma, they're waiting for that backlash. So when you're interacting with a horse, they're just giving you a really authentic, genuine, in the moment reaction to what you're putting off. And yes, the horses are having it's coming from their end too, right? So horses come from their own stories as well. They have trauma, they've experienced abuse or neglect or whatever it might be. They get moved around a lot from place to place and get separated from their friends, from owners. So oftentimes horses have to go through their own healing process too. So when you step into an engagement with a horse that's working with healing some trauma or has some trust issues or fear, whatever it might be, you have to know how to tap into that as well.
Okay. So then is it a certain, like a horse probably has to go through their own, do they have to go through their own healing process in order to be an like equine therapy horse? Or is that kind of working through it together? Is that an element of the therapy for the humans?
So I prefer to work with the horses as they're going through their own healing process.
Okay.
Like at this point, all of my horses that I have for my equine therapy, they've come such a long way in their own healing to the point that I have to go and use like other horses for sessions sometimes. So as an example, my horse Hank, he's a thoroughbred. I'll introduce you to him before we leave. And he came from a place down south where he was bred to be a racehorse. He was supposed to be a racehorse. He never actually raced. I don't know why, but, I think it's something like 90% or something crazy of thoroughbreds that are bred to be racehorses never even make it to the racetrack.
Oh, wow.
So they just overbreed them like crazy, trying to get a winner. And then the ones that never make it to the track, like Hank, if they're super lucky, end up in a good home like he did, or they go to a slaughterhouse, meat buyers, and the outcome is usually not that great. So anyway, I got Hank. I thought I was getting this like awesome athlete of a horse, right? He gets delivered out here, unload him off the trailer. I always give any new horse several weeks to settle in before I actually ride them. Hank had settled into the herd. Then I went to have my first ride on him. I was super excited, throw the saddle up on him, got on him, and he turned into a stone statue. I sat on that horse for 45 minutes to an hour, and he didn't move a muscle.
Wow.
I mean, I was trying everything.
We're supposed to be fast.
Yeah. He just had completely disassociated, completely shut down. And then it became, pretty immediately apparent that he associated people and riding with fear and, who knows what else. I mean, I don't know what his training program was like, but it probably wasn't good. So it took Hank a really long time to stop disassociating and actually take a couple steps forward with you and want to interact with you and be safe. I mean, he was dangerous because he had just been so screwed up in the head from his previous training. So taking a horse like that who's having to move through all of this, past history, and having a client who is disassociating because of trauma that they've had in their past. You put the two of them together and you say, we're here to help Hank move through this trauma. How can we do that? Let's think about how to help Hank. And in figuring that out, how to help the horse, and the client starting to understand how to help themselves.
Oh, I love that. That gave me goosebumps because then that's you're meeting the client where they are.
Yeah.
And they're able to work through it, but not in such a direct way of I'm working through my own trauma, which I know, I had a therapist on who does the, I think it's the EMDR or whatever, about the accessing kind of the feelings in a way that isn't as traumatic as really going back to some of the things you've been through. So this is it puts that layer in between the work and the intensity of the experiences.
Right. Yeah, it's not so directly confrontational with the trauma.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And then also I wonder if there is an element that as humans, we also want to help. We need help, but we find a lot of fulfillment in helping others. So it's that helping the horse, which helps you, and it becomes that symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. And when you can see, by the end of an hour's session, progress, and you actually have helped this horse, and the behavior in the horse starts to change, and you see and you feel that shift in their energy. I mean, what a great reward.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that we could all benefit from some form of therapy, and that's a little bit hypocritical for me to say because I've never done therapy. I consider this podcast my therapy. But with this type, with equine therapy, so if you've been through the big T traumas in your life, I can see absolutely, we just talked about, how that could be a way to work through it that's a little bit more indirect to make it easier. But for your everyday person who just deals with the normal, triggers and wounds and insecurities of life and whatever, the little T traumas, is there value in this type of therapy for those type of people as well?
Definitely. Just us sitting outside in nature, our anxiety, our cortisol levels are going down. By the time we walk away, if we came with any anxiety, it's going to be much lower. Our stress levels are lower. We're not on our phones. Just being in nature has a huge benefit for anybody, even if you don't consider yourself a nature lover. And especially nowadays, I mean, I have so many people that are coming out with just this general anxiety and depression. And when they know that they have this space to come to and recenter, realign, decompress, develop that connection and that relationship with the horse, go on a ride through the woods, yes, their mental health improves quite a bit. Yeah, so no, you don't have to come in with, severe trauma for this to benefit you.
Yeah.
So like if you came to the women's retreat tomorrow, you would have an amazing day. You would leave feeling totally refreshed, replenished, recharged, just from spending the time outside, spending the time with the horses, doing some breath work.
And like that safe space. Yeah, it's like creates like a safe space of being outside, but then also like I know with your women's retreat, then there's like a group of people that are all there with a similar intention, and then so then there's that feeling of like less alone. Okay, I'm curious though, like so let's say I were to start coming here to do like just straight up equine therapy. Like, what does that look like? Am I riding on the horse? Am I talking like with you? Like what is that process of equine therapy?
It is so different and highly unique for every client.
Okay.
It completely depends on what you're wanting to work through. You know, we talk about like what our therapeutic goals might be. And honestly, every session looks so different and is largely based on my intuition.
Oh, okay. All right, no, I'm good with that.
And, you know, I can have this like great idea of how I want to structure a session with somebody, you know, based on the previous work that we've done together. And I think, you know, I want to get into this today with this client and work on this issue, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to use this horse, and we're going to be in this area and this exercise and yada, yada. But what happens more often than not is that the horses have a different idea about how things should happen.
Yep.
And I can't force that, you know, I can't force that structure on them. So they're very much a part of the process in that way, that they get to determine how they show up as well. And then we have to work with that. And that's a huge part of the process too, is like allowing yourself to let go of, you know, how you think things should be.
Yes.
And that issue of, you know, control, and figuring out how to navigate things within the moment, and accepting that the horses have their autonomy as well. And then, you know, what does that look like? Okay, well, this is now the horse is behaving this way. It clearly doesn't want to participate in what we're asking it to do. So now what do we do? And then that applies to your everyday life.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. That's like, I don't know, now I'm seeing this as like the horse just embodies life. And so it's going to mirror back to you what you've got going on in yourself. It's going to react to that. But also, like, it's going to decide its own things sometimes. And then it's on you, like, of how you're going to react.
Yeah.
So it really is that relationship with an energy force that we can't directly verbally communicate with, which is what we're used to in all other aspects of life.
Right.
So you're forced to rely on all those other senses.
Yes. Yeah. And maintain your center.
Yes.
Maintain your bearings.
Okay. So what are some of the obviously giving no names, but like what are some of the types of breakthroughs you've seen like people have here?
So, I mean, a lot. I think one story that comes to mind is a client that I worked with for a couple years, and this person came to me with severe anxiety, severe social anxiety, panic attacks, you know, borderline like agoraphobic type behavior, and just sort of this general failure to launch and leave the nest, although it was well beyond time to do that.
Yeah.
So in our work together out here and working with the horses and developing that person's confidence in such a huge way, working with, actually it was Hank most of the time, and allowing that person to experience what it feels like to do an exercise with this horse, whether it was something on the ground or riding, and then be able to say that to themselves, like, oh, wow, I am more capable than maybe I previously imagined myself to be. And building on that feeling and that experience, you know, every time we worked together, to the point where, you know, that person was able to start taking more control in their personal life. And then eventually they moved out of the house. They took financial responsibility for themselves. They started their career, moved to a different city, and involved themselves in the community and has a social life. You know, I mean, just like this huge shift. It was a long road. I mean, like I said, I worked with this person for a couple of years, but now to be able to go and check in like every 6 months and things are steadily, you know, improving for this person was awesome.
Yeah.
And that all started with having these experiences with the horses that were safe. You know, there was no judgment there for that person, which was a huge thing, and what was preventing that person from really engaging socially. And being able to get up on this 1,100-pound animal and ride through the woods and have this sense of cooperation and communication that was, you know, working and started to become natural and felt good, then that all starts to bleed over into their personal life.
Yeah. What about grief?
That one, to be completely honest, is probably the most difficult for me to work with.
Yeah.
You know, the horses have this way of like absorbing things for us. I mean, you can think about, I'm sure, you know, times where something's really upsetting to you, right? And your animal, your pet, like wants to come and sit in your lap and like, console you.
Yeah.
Horses are similar in that way. Like they will be drawn to someone who is grieving, who's going through the grieving process, and it's this kind of curious interaction where the horse like absorbs that energy, and the person is, you know, relieved for at least for that experience from that interaction.
Which then I would think so much of the value in that is reminding that person that what it feels like to not carry that grief.
Right. Yeah.
Just even if for an hour.
Right. To be able to let it go just even for a couple moments, really. But the grieving process, like I said, to be honest, is it's a little more mysterious to me than some other issues that I work with. And a lot of it is just the time that it takes, but allowing people to use the space to nurture themselves throughout that process, and to allow whatever needs to come forward in this space that, you know, is safe and healing for them, and not in an office.
Yeah, not in that. Well, and again, the fear of judgment.
Right.
Because the grieving process is so, I think, different for each person. And so it's, and I'm not currently going through it, but I have some people very close to me that are, and, you know, just the fear of judgment and should I be at the certain point that I'm not, what should and shouldn't I be feeling, like all that should and shouldn't, that's all just judgment.
And and just allowing it to unfold in the way that it needs to unfold. So if I do find myself working with someone who's experiencing grief, I would do a lot of like body embodiment work with them, and not making them feel like it's something that they have to talk through, because a lot of it you can't. So doing a lot of embodiment work with them and the horse, breath work, and just allowing them to show up how they need to show up.
God, there's so much power in that just in itself. Okay, so the equine therapy, and then what else happens here? So you do the women's retreats, which are a day thing, right? Do you do any other type of, like, are there overnight type things?
We have a lot of different programs, no overnight things. That is one of our future goals, is to have some overnight accommodations. But the women's retreats, that's a full day out here, and the women's retreats are kind of like a smorgasbord of different healing modalities. So the women's retreats are a great way to come and sort of get a taste of a lot of different ways to heal. We also run horsemanship workshops. So my husband, who grew up with horses in Indiana, runs the workshops with me. And those are 4-day intensives. So it's 2 weekends in a row, Saturday and Sunday, all day. And we take people who have maybe never even been on a horse before. And by the end of the 4 days, we're cantering around in the pasture. So that's for teaching people like basic horsemanship skills and riding skills. I love the workshops. Those are a ton of fun. Summer camps for kids. So we do week-long summer camps. This last summer we did 8 weeks of summer camp. Summer camps are such a beautiful way to introduce kids about how to interact and be around horses in a way that is still magical for them.
Yes, and then that starts to, I mean, they're going to feel that relationship even on like a subconscious level, and then to have that experience at that young age to help you as you then go through life and, you know, stuff gets piled on. Like, I imagine that would be really impactful.
Well, it's the summer camp programs out here, I think, are so different because it's all about like playing, right?
Yeah.
And just like really engaging with the horses in the way that it feels natural to the kids. It's not about like putting them on a horse in an arena and telling them left rein, right rein, kick, you know, pull, stop, jump, whatever. So introducing them to horses in a way that's more about the relationship than it is about how do you use your tools to control this animal.
Oh, I love that.
So then if they do go on to, you know, take riding lessons or whatever, which we do here, we offer a riding lesson program. But if they go on to do that somewhere else, they have this experience of like, this is what it should be like to be with horses. It should be fun. It should feel good. It should be a positive, happy experience.
Yeah. I love that.
So we go swimming with the horses in the lake, which is a huge hit. So we bring in the horses and put the kids on and like swim them around. We paint the horses. You know, we take them on walks and let them graze and hang out. And they do ride. We do like trail rides and riding lesson type work, but it's not so riding focused.
So do the horses respond differently to children because they've, on average, most children have kind of less going on than we do as we get into adulthood?
It depends on the horse.
Okay. Some of them are like, don't paint me.
Yeah. Some of them are maybe just a little more sensitive to the higher, you know, energy. So like we have one horse out here who's like, no thanks, really don't want to do the summer camps.
Yeah.
It's like too intense, you know. But then plenty of them that are happy to have the attention. And a lot of times you'll see with horses, like I'll get up and ride my horse Saltos, and he's ready to like give me a challenge every single time. And he knows that I can handle it. But then you put a little kid up on his back and he turns into a completely different horse. And he's like super easy and mellow, and, you know, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
So they know, but they have their preferences too.
Yeah. Which, okay. Again, they like embody life. I love this so much. I feel like it just explains why I think so many people as little kids feel this draw to horses. Like, I know I did. I know I told you when we first spoke, like, I used to put a horse on my list of Santa Claus, like, every year, because in my child mind, like, we had a backyard, so why couldn't the horse just live out there? And, like, I had the toy ponies and everything, and, you know, I see that even in my nieces and nephews, so I imagine that's telling in itself that children just feel this pull to these really, like, magical animals. And then, you know, we get into adult life and we don't think of that as a resource for healing and growing. And so I think it's amazing what you're doing here. And I'm happy we connected.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Tell everybody where they can find more information about it here and book something if they wanted to. If people came out of town, is there somewhere to stay nearby? Like, how can they find you?
So thompsontherapy.com is the website. All of our services and programs are listed on there. You can book a session directly through the website. I offer a half-hour consultation, which is a great way for people to come out and get a feel of the property and talk about what programs might be appropriate for them. Facebook, Instagram, Thompson Therapy, and there's links to those on the website as well. I feel like there was something I was leaving out, but...
Like, do people ever come from out of town?
Oh, out of town, yeah. So we are hosts for hipcamp.com, and that's on the website as well. So if you want to come out and camp, you can camp on the property, book a ride, book an equine therapy session. You can bring your camper, your RV, your tents. We've got some awesome campsites in the woods over here by the lake. So that's a great way if you really, you know, when the weather starts cooling off, if you want to come out and camp and experience the property and the horses will come into your campsite, like hang out with you and try to go through
morning,
your trash.
Wake up.
Yeah. Stick their head in your tent. So that's a beautiful way, I think, to experience the property. But we're super close to town. We're right here off 207 and I-95 in St. Augustine. There's plenty of places, like you go stay on the beach, you get to experience the beach, and then come to the property for a retreat or a workshop, and it's super convenient.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey.
Okay, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you again so much for tuning in. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss our best of series in December and then all the fun I've got in store for the podcast for 2021. If you've been enjoying the show, please take a moment to leave a short review and a rating. That helps a lot. First of all, it just makes my day when I see new reviews, but it also helps in the algorithm world of podcasting. If you have any feedback for me or guest suggestions, especially as we move into 2021, you can always reach me at thebetteryouPodcast@gmail.com, and make sure you are following us on the socials. We are on Instagram and Facebook at The Better You Podcast. All right, that is it. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.